This afternoon, we're going to start with an executives panel with the universities. I asked Dr. Kelly and Dr. Harder to join the panel with us, and also we've added Dr. Marrero, who is the president of Georgia Southern University, and yes, a round of applause for Kyle. And for those of you that have joined us at our conferences before, Kyle has been part of our journey for a very long time. We were just talking when we were green and didn't know really what we were doing and tried to begin this work in higher education. We started with Dr. Marrero at that time at the University of West Georgia, and very appreciative of that relationship. Thank you. Dr. Lorene Flanders is the Dean of Libraries at University of South Alabama, which is right down the road from us in Mobile, Alabama. Round of applause for Lorene, Dr. Flanders. Dr. Flanders was at the University of West Georgia, and then took the dean's position at the University of South Alabama 4 years ago? 4 years ago? 5 years, oh my gosh, 5 years ago. 5 years ago. And so one of the things I just wanted to do a special note, I asked Dr. Flanders to sit on this panel because she connected with our work when we were at the University of West Georgia, and when she went to the University of South Alabama, took that work and put it within the libraries within South Alabama. So we're not working with the institution as a whole, but she took it upon herself to continue that journey of continuous improvement in the libraries. And I think her story and the continued work that she's doing there is really outstanding. One thing I wanted to just also note is I had just general conversations with individuals at lunch, and I started with, we have a framework and we're a thought partner in the process with you all, and we also connect it to where the institution is at a time and to the leadership style and approach. And it's the combination of those two things that make that journey continuous. And it's a continuous change process. So I think that's really important, because what you'll see from these leaders is you'll see commonalities of certain types of approaches within a framework, but you won't see them the same. And that's the point. You have your own styles. You bring what you bring to achieve results in your institutions, and you've been accomplished in that way. And so we want to talk a little bit to them about where they are, but most importantly, about where higher education is going and what their experiences have taught them as we move forward. So I'll start with the question, and Dr. Harder, I think I'll start with you in answering this one. What one thing do you think is most pressing as you think about the current to future state of higher education, and why? You talked a lot about decisions that you made, but what's if you could pick one thing, I hate to make you do that, but if you could pick one thing.
I think the thing that is top of mind is you have to be honest about who is a right fit at your institution. We talk about being courageous, and you're talking about being brave, but that's just because higher ed hasn't acted like the rest of the world for a long time. I mean, these sorts of conversations happen everywhere else when you're customer focused, except in higher education. And so I think it's just a being honest. This person is not a good fit. They're not going to be successful here. They're going to drag us down as we try to move towards success, whatever that is. And what are we going to do about it? So that is my key thing.
Thank you. Dr. Marrero? What are your thoughts there?
Sure, and I just want to say also that it's so extraordinary to be here, because when you have Brendan and Natalie, Lorene, people that I've known for Brendan for a while, and to get to know Natalie, her extraordinary leadership, and Brendan's. And I just want to hit one point before I answer this question that's so cool about what we do here when we partner with Janet, with Studer, with the alignment in terms of the framework of what we do, is each of us as leaders bring our philosophies, ideals, the way we lead to do that and to have impact and effect in the outcomes. I had a run at 6 years at West Georgia, and when we left, we'd had 6 years of record enrollment, 7 record indicators institution. And we were headed in a direction under a way in which we were leading and going. And then, so much changed within that next year. Interim leadership, then the pandemic, et cetera. And for Brendan to come in with his extraordinary view and adaptability and innovation and drive for that is just remarkable. I want to give him kudos, because when we talked about the job, when I knew he was going to get it, we had a great conversation about the things that I felt I left undone that needed to get done. And so I'm so excited for him, his leadership at West Georgia and where he's taking it, and to hear Natalie leading in higher ed. And what I can tell you, though, is we each lead in very different ways within that framework, within our attributes. So I just wanted to say that and say congratulations to both of you and everybody. So, for me, if I said one word, it'd have to be market. Because then I got, me, I can't say just one thing. So I'd have to say 5 under that with the header of market, because when you think where market is and how it's shifted extraordinarily and the exacerbation of it through COVID-19, it's affecting enrollment in every single way in which we look at enrollment. It's affecting our workforce, our faculty, our staff, our retention of that workforce, the recruitment of that workforce. And then from a standpoint of competitiveness, it's not only the definition of what we have to serve as an outcome and those goals, the return on investment, the value that we talk about of what we deliver, but really we're at a precipice now where we're competing with 18-year-olds that can make $45,000 to $60,000 a year with little or no skill set. And when they have that option compared to then what is a 4-year degree worth, its value, its speed to degree and credential, and the debt that may come with it, well, that whole heightened relevance in terms of return on investment has been just, at a quotient of 10 based on the marketplace. So I say that in big caps, and then I just got to finish with, this room makes me very anxious. Because I was here at the University of West Florida for 8 years, and I did Dancing with the Stars in this room twice, and I lost both times. Now, there's a point to this, because, I was about 25 pounds heavier and I did the tango. Nobody likes to see short, fat people do a tango. I'm just saying. So I did not win. But the important thing was, and here's the point, know your market and know who you are in the market.
Good. Dean Flanders? What's your thought?
Well, I told Janet yesterday when we were meeting, I'm going to bring this back to libraries, because I think that segment of the population across higher ed, some notes to presidents and provosts. So what's the one thing is the need for stable funding. So, how easy that is. But I wanted to frame this for libraries, because I think this is true for many units within your organization. When enrollment declines and, maybe work goes away, and Natalie, you did so well talking about checking out programs because you had such a dramatic funding problem. In libraries and many other units, the work doesn't go away. In fact, it increases. And in libraries, again, let me be selfish, say we're impacted 5 to 7% a year inflation in terms of our materials budgets. To give you a frame of reference, the University of South Alabama Libraries has 4 distinct libraries. We have about an $8 million budget across those libraries. About $5 million is for content and systems and technology. And particularly in our educational content, a 5 to 7% inflation rate is, do the math, $250,000. And so the funding from the standpoint of the institution may go down, but it doesn't go down for us. And there's no less grass to cut, so to speak, for those in facilities and that type of thing. So for us, it often means more work, negotiating with vendors for different types of content. When we do have declines, revamping zillions, I'd say, hundreds perhaps of web pages as we strip resources away. Classes may actually go up even though there are fewer students, because we have to train not only ourselves and our staff, but more readily we have to train the faculty who are in the teaching roles and the students. Mm-hmm. So so often I've been, for years and years in higher ed, and we'll say, whoops, we've got to do a funding cut across the board, 3%, 5%. And there you are. And so many of our elements of the organization, the work doesn't go away. And so the need for funding to be stable creates issues. And this kind of, let me tie this back a little bit to RPG, because we just use facilities for as an example. If we do deferred maintenance, and you mentioned that, eventually that impacts RPG. If we do deferred maintenance on technology, it may impact our students and faculty ability to work in that academic environment. When our facilities look terrible, that's going to have an impact on RPG and future enrollment. So recognizing that and thinking about that is tremendously important.
Great. Yeah, and I just appreciate the partnership with you, Lorene. Just because Lorene and I have a monthly 4 to 6 weeks call. I love to connect with her because she gives me that perspective of a unit working. So when I get the chance to work across the executive team, I go back to her and do some questions and testing against what's that feeling like in a unit. And I just really appreciate those conversations. I'm in the professionalism of that. Thank you. Dr. Kelly?
One, I would agree with all of my colleagues. There's too many people who feel like they're entitled to working at a university even though they're not meeting the mission, and we are the ones responsible for putting them there. Market, I couldn't agree more with Kyle, because we're not adjusting to a market that is changing, and we need to adjust. And the funding model for higher education is not a sustainable one. The cost keeps going up, and we keep pushing that onto consumers, and now we're at a place where consumers are going, I'm not going to pay that. Yeah. I'm going to go and make $50,000 a year. Now, that won't have the long-term payoff, but they are opting out of the economy that we built. There is one other that I would add, so I don't repeat any of those, and that's we have to abandon our way of doing. We are so steeped in tradition and so scared of doing differently that we allow ourselves to have governance models and ways of doing business, and we were just talking about it over lunch. Any product that has to come to market that takes more than 6 months is already dead. And the average length of time between concept of a degree program and SACS accreditation is too long. We have, a lot of that is internally imposed. We have traditions where we say, this is the way we do it, and this is how shared governance works. And no other organization has sustained itself that way. And I always use my hometown as a frame of reference. Now that I've had a chance to connect with all of my friends from Flint, Michigan, that was the home of General Motors. It was the city that had the largest number of millionaires per capita in America. And then there were agreements made by executives of General Motors in the 40s and 50s that made an exit from that city in the 70s and 80s and decimated it. Right, and changed the automotive industry forever in America and changed a state forever. When you watch that happen, then you know that things like what we're talking about right now can break down if we don't get out of our own way. And we are still very much in our way because we've got 4,500 institutions that are basically doing business in very similar ways and not necessarily getting sustainable results.
That's great. Thank you. So you've hit on it. Kyle, let's start with you this time. You've hit on some of the external and internal factors, but how are those internal, external factors influencing the decisions you make as you think about the current state to the future state, and what makes that different than, let's say, 5 years ago?
Well, certainly everything's been exacerbated, accelerated. Innovation, adaptation, our entire team, that's what we're spending our time in. We're looking at every single way. If you flipped it on its side, what would it mean? Scott and I, had a really interesting discussion about 2 weeks ago as we see 7,000 incomplete applications out of our 22,000 applications that either don't have the transcripts, whatever they may be. Every high school in the state of Georgia has a separate format for transcripts. And we start, let's just stop and think about how could we fix all this process? Why do we even apply in the traditional senses to the institution? And I think to Brendan's point, this is a time of which we have to look at all those obstacles that we've just said, well, that's just the way it's done. These are our challenges, and question them and change them and come up with solutions to be solution makers along that way. I'd say the biggest, I've been finishing my 9th year as a president. You know, the challenge is, I really, and thank you all for bringing this up, because the civility aspect of it, the heightened polarization, politicalization of just about anything and everything. In my career of 28 years in higher ed, it is at a heightened state that has potential to really harm not only higher ed, but our communities and the concepts of really instruction, what we have debate and dialogue about in our classrooms, on our campuses. It's an interesting time. My biggest challenge, and I'll just share it with you, is as I came into Georgia Southern 3 years ago, was really to bring in an inclusive excellence action plan, center pillar in our strategic plan, really move forward in that way in an institution that I felt really needed to tackle these very tough areas in a conservative state, understanding the values and what we can and can't do, but then really trying to get to what matters out of that, and really what is the outcomes, and it's engagement, belonging, safety, you know, a sense of value for each and every individual. And so, you know, I think one of our obstacles, challenges, but then perhaps the solution, which I'm always looking for, is we have to think of these challenges we're facing that become so politicized in what's the bottom line, what are we actually trying to achieve at the end of the day, and find how to get there without it having to be polarizing.
Yeah, that's great. Lorene.
Well, you're asking, you know, how is it different from 5 years ago, these internal and external factors. So a little bit following on Kyle talking about safety, I was thinking about that over the weekend, and I thought, you know, my perception of what I think about is in terms of safety and security in my institution and in my physical facilities and so forth has certainly shifted. You know, we've always had that general concern, you know, the kind of concern that security cameras are there for. We've had, you know, many sessions on disruptive patrons and on active shooters. I know we've all engaged in those. But now I'm sensing something different at particularly the state level, the attack from the Capitol, those conversations that are very troubling about critical race theory and, you know, the misunderstanding of how that's even being thought of or much less taught within different levels of education. Book banning, you know, whole governors holding up lists of, you know, these books should be banned in K-12. Well, you know, fortunately that doesn't happen in academic libraries until it did. This year we had our first challenge from a donor who had been giving us books for many years. We'd add some of those and not others for various reasons, but this person became quite irate this year when we didn't add a particular title. And he said, you're political cherry picking, you're censoring. And we spoke with our academic department. They agreed with us. They said, this is, you know, kind of a pop piece. It doesn't have a place in an academic library collection. But, you know, I'm going to come and talk to your president, and I'm going to cease all donations to the campus. And, you know, you're engaging in censorship, just all of that. I didn't think I would see that in my career in academic libraries. I've certainly seen it among my public and school colleagues. So that's one thing that hit me kind of unexpectedly. And I want to shift to talk a little bit about how people in our organizations are feeling right now. This year there was an article in the Journal of Library Administration. The title of the article was related to library organizational cultures, and specifically about library staff morale and the impact cultures have on staff morale. Now, libraries are typically made up in the academic world of about 40% faculty, our librarians, and about 60% staff. So most of the people who report to me and to my colleagues who are joining me here today are staff. And this is a quote: "Staff report that administrators seem not to understand the level of personal financial hardship that they face and experience daily." And Kyle, I remember having a conversation with you some years ago. We were having a dean's breakfast, and we started talking about food insecurity among our students. And I remember saying, you know, Kyle, too, it's an issue for our staff because look at the salaries. And we did some work. You know, we did some really good work there. Fortunately, we're doing some good work at South Alabama. Our president has recognized the need for faculty salary increases, which is done recently. We're at the 25th percentile of CUPA, adjusted for COLA for Mobile, Alabama. So, but he said, you know, it's a step in the right direction. But my faculty were receiving $10,000 to $16,000 increases, and they've been underpaid for these many decades. My staff are making, and let me just say we have a 40 grade staff level for the entire institution. Grade 1, fortunately not library folks, is $9.01 an hour. If you're lucky to be hired at grade 2, it's $9.03 an hour. Seriously. When you shift to library, out of those 40 grades, the first grade is about a 12, and I'm able to pay the top rate of $12.73 an hour. The next grade up, a couple grades up, $13.52 an hour. And for my top library supervisor staff folks, project managers, I pay between $12.75 and $14.03 an hour. The federal poverty level for a family of 4 is what per hour? In 2022, it's $13.60. So that person's making 43 cents an hour more than the federal poverty level. And that's true across our organizations. I know we all recognize that and we struggle with it, but we really need to think about how our staff particularly are struggling financially at this point.
Yeah, good. And so, and Natalie, as I connect to, to you, I mean, and so as Lorene and I have talked, so the solution is to increase enrollment, right? I mean, so we have to have more money coming in, so solution, increase enrollment, easier said than done, since there's hardly any institution across the country and in the worlds that we live in here, that's really increasing in that way. But that's where we've all had conversations about it's got to be a new business model. We can't just always depend on enrollment. I know you and I have had those conversations. So just kind of doing a takeoff from Lorene, as you look at internal, external factors, how do we, from the last 5 years thinking to the next 5 years, how do we manage to the things that are being talked about at that ground level?
It's a great question. I think it's a few things. First of all, one of the positive things I think that has happened over the last few years is that the public demands more transparency. And when you have transparency, it means there's also more ownership. The idea that there used to be a president that would, wave their scepter over here and different things would happen. It isn't like, yeah.
Of anybody who shouldn't. Yeah.
And so, now you have me totally thrown. But I love that because it's expected, the ownership is shared. You can't say you didn't know your program was losing money or that we had more staff today than we had 5 years ago and we have fewer students. So I think that's very positive. And it also allows for sharing of articles that I think many of our employees may not otherwise have read. Like here's another article from the Chronicle about a small college that's closing because it didn't change. And so I think that all of the things that are talked about here, you now have different ways to communicate with people to emphasize we can be innovative, we can change, or unfortunately you die the slow death. So I think that's very positive. I think the final point to me, and I say this, in so many ways higher ed is its own worst enemy. When you think to your question about what other industry is like that, it's the church, and they're suffering from enrollment as well. So I think that the expectation for us to, when I think about Coker and other institutions, you've got to find alternatives to tuition and room and board revenue. And we have the capability to do that. We have some of the smartest people that work at our institutions. Why aren't we maximizing what they're doing? When you talk about folks that maybe have just settled in, maybe it's because we haven't given them a challenge beyond what they've always done. Are we always tapping the same people to serve on the same committees? Give folks a chance to demonstrate that they've got other neurons working besides what they're teaching in class or how they're interacting with students. So I think for all of our challenges, it is so exciting if you are in an environment where you can build a sense of urgency, you understand the data, and you have the moral imperative that students come first, because that's those are the key ingredients.
Yeah, thank you. Let's turn it a little bit to your roles, asking the question, and Brendan, we'll start with you. As you think about the president's role, and how has that role shifted over the years, and what's the future role of a president and executive teams in order to lead to the future? So what about your role?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I know a lot has been written about that. Part of my doctoral training was in social movements, and there's a lot of, when you study social movements, you see leaders that kind of start the movement and leaders that enthusiastically mobilize the movement. And then once you get to maintenance, it's a different type of leader, right? Well, that's the same as the university presidency. It's continued to evolve. And right now, there's a type of leader that's going to be needed in higher ed to get us over ourselves. And then you're going to probably have more, kind of CEO-style presidents that emerge. But that leader right now is a leader who asks questions, that there is disruption that is required in that. And I say that because my colleagues just highlighted breakdowns in the marketplace and breakdowns in our own model. What we didn't highlight is one that presidents have to ask about. I have 4 former students who all became faculty members in the last 5 years. All of them have left. They said, this job sucks. They had tenure, and they left because they said, this job sucks. 2 of them were at private institutions, 2 of them were at public institutions. And I spent a lot of time listening to them going, why? And the model that we use for our entire institution is they're questioning it as the youngest talent. So I go, my job as a president, and I think what's required of a president, is to connect those dots and get very serious about reality. And that's hard, because that makes our job suck a little more. Right? Because it's more fun when you show up and everybody's like, oh, look at, I'm wearing my crown, I've got my scepter. I'm sorry, I love Natalie. So but I say that was part of the job. That's just not the job anymore. We talk about it on our team all the time. I say, if you're not 2 weeks ahead of me, then why am I paying you to be here? And I'm going to tell you, I heard some people go, ooh, nobody at the University of West Georgia table reacted that way. Because they all go, that's right. We have to be running out in front of the consumers that we're serving. And it is the president's job to make certain that universities adapt to that.
Good. Natalie, what are your thoughts?
I forgot the question,
yeah,
but Brendan answered it so well. Well, it's so funny because I had called Brendan the other day about something, and when he answered the phone, he called me back and he said, I'm sorry I didn't answer when you called. He said I was up to my neck in attorneys, and we both just laughed because, and it's not whining, it's the job, but it's true, people don't understand, I think, the ways in which, I don't want to say we're distracted now, but the things that you have to pay attention to while you're, it's the old adage, building the plane while you're flying it, but some of the stuff has just gotten out of control. I think it goes back to the civility issue. I think things are elevated to a point where everybody wants to litigate because they got their feelings hurt. I think there are challenges, from a resource development perspective that people have expectations about, and they're just not based in reality anymore, especially as you're trying to change the institution. What do you mean you got rid of that sacred cow, or how is it that we can be different? I think that, but also to Kyle's point, the fact that we have these conversations so we can learn from each other about what's new and what can we copy and steal, I think those are so important. But it is, to your point, Janet, I'm still in the, I don't go home and say I'm tired. I go home and ask for wine therapy. But I'm conscious that, at some point it has to, it isn't that you ever stop the running, but at some point you have to stop going uphill. Yeah. And that's what I think all of us as leaders are trying to get over. So you do have a new day.
Yeah, I think that's right. And So it's not that the changes that occur are going to get any easier. Our ability to manage through that, lead through that, and adapt to that has to change in some way, right?
Well, yeah, and just quickly, but that's why it's people. We will have problems every day.
It's the right people that get you
Yes.
through those problems. That's why you can never take your eye off that ball.
Yeah, I think it's so critical. And as you're getting the right people, you're making those decisions that affect an entire team. And you have to balance that conversation in a way that's difficult to have that conversation. So that's the burden that we bear in the most positive way, because we're going to get to a better side. I mean, I found myself saying so many times these days, we're making these decisions because we're going to get to a better side. There are opportunities in front of us to get to a better side. I don't know about you, but I deep down really believe that, and know that if we stop and give into to sometimes that feeling that we can't take that extra step, we have to take that step. We have to take that step. Good. Kyle?
You know, I always love hearing Natalie and Brendan, because they articulate directly our issues and what we're facing. You know, it's interesting. I think when I first started at West Georgia, I was told about one of the previous presidents that this is where he put his stack of books, because he would make sure and set aside 10 hours a week to read. And I just thought, wow, that's amazing, you know. And other than getting up even earlier each day, time. You know, there's Tim Elmore, I don't know if you know him, he has a wonderful saying, a book, Marching Off the Map, where he says, timely and timeless are what we're trying to achieve in education, is you know, how can we be timely and continually be projecting and innovating and moving forward and skating to where the puck's going to be, meeting market needs, et cetera, and then timeless in terms of what are the attributes that we have to deliver that are true throughout education, the critical thinking, problem solving. It's the whole liberal arts concept of what we stand for, why we bring value added within that. I'm adding just time. You know, just time. I mean, I have 3 campuses that people take time. And so then for me, the challenge, what I'm really focused on, is the quality of that time, the focus of that, and that will have the greatest outcomes, and what that's going to mean. And then, you know, I think inevitably as a president, we have to know that we just are not going to make everybody happy. And that's okay, but we do have the responsibility of explaining and communicating the why at every turn.
Yeah, I think so. You know, Kyle, and what you mentioned too is as decisions are made, even at those systems level, there are critical decisions that are being made that really add more to your responsibility. So how we used to staff even those leadership positions have changed that add more to us, right? So you're having to manage, I mean, what you're talking about, I think, you have the same amount of time, but you really have to manage and lead things differently and look at the interconnection of those dots constantly. Is that what I'm hearing?
You know, our jobs have changed so much in terms of the external expectation, and I've always been sort of that town and gown type of leader, but that expectation that is everything from system to legislators to donors to alumni to internal to faculty, staff, students, it's understanding the importance, relevance, the managing of that to then keep us moving at the speed of business, which has to be what we achieve at the end of the day.
Yeah, so good. Lorene, I'm going to ask you the same question, more from a dean's perspective. You know, I as being a former dean, of course I would, but I think one of the most critical roles in an institution is a dean's role, because you're really leading the core of what's important in those academic programs, and the success of the students really depend on you and your ability to lead, and you from that, you're servicing all colleges and the institution from your dean's perspective. And the libraries, in terms of the digitizing of media, how has the Dean of Libraries role shifted, and what is the future of libraries, and how does your position as Dean evolve to that?
Well, I would say, Janet, I probably go way back farther than some of my colleagues here, because my career spans the 2 centuries in which we've all lived. I started in academic higher ed in the 80s, and moved on. When I came to West Georgia in 2005, I remember our VP for Student Affairs, Melanie McClellan, had been to some conference, and we had this big faculty meeting, and she came back and she said, the thing we need to do is to break down silos. And it was like, yes. And we all know that, but it was news, sort of. And we've been interviewing provost candidates about 3 weeks ago at the University of South Alabama, and one of the candidates says, one of the things we need to do is break down silos. I'm like, here we are again. But for libraries, I think we are very interdependent within our organizations, and we're very dependent across campus for campus input, but we also provide input. So fostering partnerships for libraries is huge. I think back in the years when technology was emerging, and 1995, Georgia established Galileo, the first online library service in the world, really, across the state.
That's right.
And I remember an HR person coming in and saying, you have computers in the library? Why would you need computers? So, there's that reality. People don't understand that aspect. And I thought, we've been in computers back in like the previous couple of decades when I was in library school. But we were fostering an understanding that faculty needed at that time to utilize technology. That's probably older than the career lives of some folks in the room, but we became kind of that sandbox. And I remember saying to a previous president, not you, Kyle, faculty development is so key, and we were planning on expanding the library, and we see a faculty development center within the library, not necessarily led by the library, but in partnership. And it was kind of like, oh, in a center, what a concept. So, we've come a long way. Now everybody has that type of thing. We recognized early on the need for that out of the classroom support for students. And so now it's like every library or institution has a writing center and student tutoring, but we were early at the table there. So for us, it's maintaining those partnerships across the institution. Libraries, keep evolving. I remember with my West Georgia colleagues saying, it seems like every 18 months everything changes within the library. Maybe it's 12 months, maybe it's 6, maybe it's a week. It's just, this crazy evolution, sometimes in fits and starts. I want to talk about a few new roles, and these are not necessarily super new roles. Many of libraries are working in areas such as data management, and certainly our facilities have become out of the classroom academic learning support centers, not only with partnerships with tutoring and writing and that type of thing, and faculty development, but just places where students can engage with the technology they can't necessarily afford that they need centrally, but also with the low tech. If I had invested in whiteboards, I would not be sitting here. I would be, owning one of those beach houses down the way, but there's not enough whiteboards in the universe because that collaborative spirit that, is so infused in the academy now. But I want to say this one thing about staying relevant and staying ahead of the curve. In January of 2021, the mayor of Mobile, Sandy Stimpson, said, we're going to start vaccinating everyone in Mobile, which Mobile has about a population of a couple of 100,000. There was no plan to register that. We're going to have drive-through clinics at the Civic Center next week. There was no plan to register everyone. We're all going to sit in our cars in lines, 40 miles long, chugging along, burning up gas. And some of the medical doctors and healthcare personnel in our College of Medicine, our USA Health Hospital system associated with the University of South Alabama said, the library folks can help us. And so our wonderful librarians in the biomedical library, whose new director is here today, said, sure, we can take on that role. And they spent nights and weekends working on a registration system for registering us for vaccinations, for contact tracing for the institution and for across the community. They trained the county health personnel. They trained medical doctors and other healthcare providers in how to manage the data and so forth. And so I say to them, I owe my life to you. And you heard what I said a little earlier about how stressed my staff are, and staff are about financially. And so I can say right here, and I kind of break up when I say that, they saved my life, but I can't pay them a living wage. And, you know, I can say that to them with love and understanding, but I certainly can't right now make a difference. I do say my president is working on that. But that's a harsh reality to face. Janet and I, just one last thing, we were talking yesterday, and I said, I just seen a job ad for a small private institution, very renowned institution, for a dean of libraries, and they said, you need to be, you know, we want someone who's looking and focusing on evolving types of media over the next 50 years, and boy, I said, I won't be alive in 50 years. And so, you know, we need that in our job ads for many things. We need to be focusing on the future that's not only outside of our career lives, but outside of our lives if we live to be 100.
Thank you. And thank you and your team for the contributions that we made. Again, you helped me keep it real, Lorene. You helped me so much keep it real. As we close today, I'll turn to our presidents and ask them, you know, is there anything that we didn't say, or one last contribution that you could make that you think is worthwhile for us to know? Just a summary thought as we close the session today. And I'll open it up to whoever would like to go first.
I'll go. I just read a compelling title. I haven't read the article. I read the title and saved it for myself. It said, "Is higher education a CD in a streaming age?" Now, personally, I like come to Jesus questions. But everything that we've described still doesn't hit on, and I am willing to fundamentally change that thing. The service model, the outcome, whatever we have to be asking existential questions, or the answers will come to us, not from us.
That's great. Thank you.
I'll take from Brendan's there, yes, yes, and yes, but the implementation of that, and what we can never lose sight of is we work with human beings, with people, and they have to see the value individually and corporately in that. And so communication is critical, and I think if anything has changed drastically about our job in this age of accelerated innovation and adaptation is we have to be the most or as effective as possible in cascading that communication throughout all we do, and as an outcome that our people, at least those that want to, you know, it's sort of the fishbowl, you put the food on the top, and, you know, they also have to come up and want to eat it and be part of that cycle, and that's how we're going to move this along. I think that's the key ingredient, that will enable us to accelerate change.
Thank you.
I would take the opportunity to thank my team. Could you stand up? Point of personal privilege from the Queen. Could you stand up? Because you really have done a great amount of work. And then I just want to thank everybody in this room, because you are the people that give me hope that higher ed can come to grips with what it needs to come to grips with in order to make us maybe the country that we once were from an education perspective. It is challenging our beliefs. It is being willing to think that you have to throw out the baby with the bathwater, or, you know, I think so good. I mean, the changes will be forced on you. We've all seen it in the last 2 years. So I would ask you to challenge, question, be curious, because it's the type of activities that we're all engaging in that means that higher education, and in other words, people who want an education, you know, we're going to be the hope for them. So thank you.
Thank you. And I would like to extend my appreciation to all of you. You know, I say this to our team. I love this for you all to be here, and I love for our team to be here, because what I always say to them, you don't understand, these are my friends, right? I mean, I work with them. I work with people every day, and we can't help but become friends, because I think if we don't become friends, it'd be hard for us to do this work. But you're my friends. You help me learn and grow, and I'm better today because of people like you. So thank you very much for being here and part of the panel. Give a round of applause. Thank you.